The truth in telling. Memoir and essay as mirrors of humanity. This is going to be an exciting panel because we have three memoir and essayists with us. We have Chester L. Richards, as well as Bill Holzman and Sue William Silverman, who have all released at least one memoir, and in some cases more. And of course, there are essays, and they've been writing each in their own way over the course of their lifetime. And I am just so thrilled to be speaking with you all. Welcome to the Book Fest Fall 2025. All right, let's dive right in, shall we? Memoir and essay can often feel like this act of standing naked. I think, Chester, actually, that was one of your terms that you used.
Yeah, I introduced that to the world. So, but it's true. It's true. You really expose yourself, a lot of what's inside of you, to a general community, people you have no idea who's going to receive it and how they're going to react to whatever it is that you're saying. But everything you write, you're exposing yourself. It doesn't matter what it is. You can write fiction. You're really talking about yourself when you write fiction. You can even write a university textbook and you expose yourself for good or for bad. I've read some really bad textbooks, and I have to tell you, it doesn't speak well for the professor that's wrote that book.
So tell me what compels you to write this way, with that raw, just bearing your soul. Chester, can you continue?
First of all, you don't start out bearing your soul. It's something that does happen along the way. And you have to develop some protections. My wife was a psychotherapist, and she talked about boundaries. And I think that's one thing that a writer really has to establish before you go public with anything that you've put down on paper. You have to realize that other people are going to react in a variety of different ways. But the thing that really helps a writer, I think, it certainly helped me, was the recognition that when somebody criticizes you, they're not talking about you, they're talking about themselves and the way they are reacting. They're not talking about what's going on inside of you. And that's a protection that a writer should develop, is the recognition that critics and people who are very favorable to what you write, they're really talking about themselves in their comments. So,
that's true. Yeah. Really, a memoir, even though it's a personal writing about oneself, it still is reflective of the audience. I think that's so true. Bill, I want to pull you into this as well. Can you talk about bearing your honesty and telling your truth, please?
I started writing because I wanted a change. I needed a change. I landed in a place of burnout, and then the world landed in a place of burnout, and I wanted to understand how I landed there and how we all landed there. And for me, making space and time to write, that I needed to be honest about it. If I wanted to change, I needed to be candid. I needed to be truthful, as truthful as possible. But I also wanted to be compassionate. And I think being able to identify what are the things that are pain points still, what were the things that shaped me, what were the things that I experienced that led me to this moment. It wouldn't be interesting if it wasn't honest. It wouldn't be useful. It wouldn't have propelled me to make the changes that I wanted to change if I hadn't been both honest and compassionate with myself. I love the phrase, I love the idea and the image of standing naked in front of everybody, with these vulnerable truths. But I think there's some real wisdom in there. You can't try on something new unless you get naked, so I think there's real power in that if you can expose yourself in an appropriate way.
And it's hard. It's really hard. Yeah,
it is. But if you can, then it's all the more powerful to be able to try on something new, to be able to go in the direction that I wanted to go. I couldn't have done that unless I bared it all.
And that also leads to your point, that connection and that universality. Sue, I'll pull you in for your thoughts because you do this oh so eloquently in your writing. Can you speak to that?
Sure, of course. For me, when I first start writing a project, I'm just writing for myself. I'm trying to understand the metaphors of my experience, the irony of it, the depth of it. What did something happen? And I want to make sense of it. So I'm just writing for myself, no holds barred. I don't think about the outside world. And so that gives me a lot of freedom to really go deep and explore the self and what an event meant. And after I finished writing it, I do feel a sort of distance from it. I've learned what I need to learn, and so I'm really ready to send it out into the world at that point. And in some ways, creative nonfiction is sort of turning your life into art. So once it is turned into art, and I feel a kind of distance from it, that really helps me feel protected. So even though I'm, just writing about, anything that's happened to me, unhappy childhood, addiction, whatever it is, I'm really ready for the public to see it because I don't feel as connected to it. It's out there in the world, just go, and then I'm just working on something else. So I think when you're writing, just don't think about what's going to happen to it. Just focus on what you need to learn first and foremost.
In Selected Misdemeanors, you write flash essays that feel like these emotional snapshots. Can you talk about writing flash? Why do you write flash? And maybe lead into a little bit about how that taps into metaphor. I know you have a few examples, if you could share one too.
Sure, absolutely. So to me, a flash essay is very much a focused look at what it means to be human. And it's sort of ironic or kind of an interesting phenomenon that most of us, when we start writing, think about these big events, that's our sort of go-to place, which was true for me initially. I, wrote kind of these big events, things like, unhappy childhoods, recovering from addiction, the loss of a loved one. But when you think about it, what about all other time? All of those smaller moments that really make up a life. And that's sort of where flash comes in, because the fact of it is that all the rest of the time is really a lot of time. So there's a lot to write about. So we see like these small moments of beauty or miniature forms of betrayal, snippets of loss. And that's what I really focus on in these 71 essays that comprise Selected Misdemeanors. And one example is that my sister and I used to play this game. We would walk on our hands, and it'd be a contest to see who would reach a destination first. And she would play it with me because she always won and make her feel good. I always played it because it was the only time she would spend with me because she really didn't like to spend time with me. And so, and that, just telling that to you now, that's sort of an interesting anecdote. However, that's not enough to make an essay. So writing about it, what I came to understand is that when we played this game, I saw her as upside down because we'd be walking on our hands. So that led me to think of her as my upside down sister. And then that led to the metaphor that her love was upside down, that she really did not know how to love me in a really pure way. And that's only something I would discover in the writing process itself. And that's really the importance of writing, is to try to reach these deeper metaphoric moments.
Yeah. And I know Bill and Chester can both relate to that. Chester, I know that you have some very specific moments as well. Would you like to share one?
Specific moments? Goodness. No, I don't have specific. Well, I have so many. I can't even say the word. So many specific moments.
Specific, yeah, you can spit it out.
Right, there you go. Pacific rather than specific. There's
Maybe with the leopard.
oh
That's a good one.
yeah, that seems to be a favorite of a lot of people. So I was on an expedition in Africa, in Ethiopia, back in the 1976, as a matter of fact, a long time ago. So we did a little warm-up excursion down a little side river called the Awash River. Anybody who's into anthropology will recognize Awash. That's where Lucy was discovered, the pre-primate or pre-human.
Australopithecus afarensis.
You got it. Yeah. Anyway, so we were near there. We were at a waterfall on that little river, and there was a little building, and outside the building there was a cage. And before breakfast one day, I wandered down there, and in that cage was a leopard. And the leopard looked at me, and I looked at the leopard, and I says, "Hey, you're kind of lonely, aren't you?" So I sat down next to the leopard. Now you have to understand the bars on this cage were probably a foot apart. So he could stick his head out a little ways, and I could easily have gotten in there and petted him if I had had the courage. But being on an expedition, you don't want to take any risks. So I didn't pet him, but I just sat and chatted with him. And after a little bit, he started purring. And we talked, and he purred, and the purrs got louder. Then he got up and stretched himself and rubbed himself against the bars of the cage and sat back down and just snuggled up against the cage and against my face. Our faces were probably 6 inches apart. That's how close we were. And we sat and talked for about a half an hour. And then I had to leave. I had to go back and get to the campsite and get some breakfast. And, it's just an epiphany. It's one of those things that happens. It's a strange encounter, but I had a wonderful time with this great big kitty.
Yeah.
But, he was big, but I kind of thought of him as a little kitty.
Yeah.
A friendly kitty.
That's really beautiful. Bill, I'll invite you to maybe share a moment if you'd like.
What kind of moment do you want to hear?
Oh, you've got so many, I know.
I know. I mean, in terms of those moments where we start to understand ourselves in terms of the things that, I think when we move through the world, we don't pay attention to pop culture well enough. And, I was a lonely kid. I was a really lonely kid. I was isolated because of my own family dynamics, but also being queer and not understanding what that meant, but I would connect so beautifully with like people on TV. Like I would be watching the Golden Girls and suddenly feel like all was right in the world and understanding like, wow, these are real people. These are conversations, and they're talking to people like me. For some reason, I connected so deeply with that. So I started paying attention to like what else in pop culture would give me an outlet, would give me a resource, not just to understand what was going on in the world, what was accessible, what was available, but also to understand myself. Like Madonna was my favorite in terms of giving me language to understand what it means to be a human, what it means to be alive, what it means to engage the world, and not to shed, the identities that you grew up with, not to shed those garments that have been given to you, but to transform them, to use them, to thrive with them. So I had I don't know how many hundreds of moments I could talk about in terms of television or walking into a space onto a dance floor and hearing Madonna and feeling all is right in the world, and suddenly this was going to be my stepping stone forward.
And with your family too, like we were talking about family in various ways. Sue felt that her sister was upside down, whereas Bill, you felt ornamental, and you were the youngest out of a what was it, 12 siblings?
10. I'm number 10. I'm number 10.
You're number 10. So that's
Yeah.
a unique dynamic. Can you talk about this feeling that you had, a feeling, quote unquote, ornamental?
Sure. I'm the youngest of 10, and you would think, oh, you must have grown up with a big bustle and a huge, busyness all the time. And yeah, sometimes, but I'm also a lot younger than my older siblings. The first 9 are within 11 years, and I was 7 years later. So I had the dual experience of both being part of the big family and also being an only child. And that gap, anytime we got together as a family, that gap was bigger and bigger and wider the older I got. I felt so detached from my family, from my siblings. They had, the family culture was set by the time I was in the world. So by the time I was conscious, there was nothing for me to contribute to setting the dynamic of how does everybody talk to each other? What's funny at the dinner table? What's moving? When does everybody get quiet and pay attention? I had nothing to contribute to that because I was over on the side. If I spoke, I'd get this look from some of my siblings, like, where did that come from? Is that a person? I didn't know that, and that really, that shapes us as we go through life. But the most painful moments where that felt so, it still is hard to process sometimes. When I saw the way that my siblings responded to my parents' alcoholism without any consideration of me, that for me was an insight that pushed me further to the sides. I was the one living at home. Nobody ever paid attention to, is Bill safe? Or I watched them watch me get in the car with my parents, driving, and they should not have been driving. And those moments are still so vivid and so clear to me. And as much as I've made peace with it now, and I think the writing process gave me space to make a lot of peace with that. I still haven't made peace with those moments. I still haven't figured out how do I let go of the pain in those moments, those things. And I think it's okay to hold on to that. I'm still learning and growing from those moments and those experiences. Even when I was 12 years old, I'm still figuring it out. I'm still unpacking it.
And I'm curious about advice. I'll segue over to Chester for this one because, Chester, speaking of moments, you have these amazing adventurous moments like we just discovered. You co-authored one of the original episodes of Star Trek, the Tholian Web. You have experiences as a real life rocket scientist and wild adventures, whitewater rafting. That's hard for me to say, whitewater rafting. And so much more. What advice would you have to others who are maybe looking to create their own adventures or to feel unstuck or to write down their own essays, their own stories? Chester.
Well, you have to find it within yourself to write. I mean, that's just, it's a matter of just starting and then continuing and just practice. You get good at anything you practice. Let me tell you a little bit about the way I look at adventure. I've done a lot of adventuring, but my perspective of that is anything that you do that's new, that has novelty, is an adventure. Even finding something new on television, some new program that you suddenly enjoy, that's an adventure. It's a very minor adventure, admittedly. So there are various degrees of adventure. But you get married, for example, that's a big adventure, not a little one. Taking a new job, that's a big adventure as well, because you're finding yourself in a completely new situation. You have to adapt to that situation and to all new people and new experiences and things like that. So everybody goes through life and has adventures. As long as you recognize that anything that you do that is for the first time, it is an adventure. Now you can go out and climb a mountain. I've done that. You can go out and surf big waves. I've done that. You can scuba dive to the bottom of the ocean. I've done that. Not a very deep dive to the bottom of the ocean. Wasn't in deep sea. It was shallow, 100 feet down kind of stuff. Those are real adventures too. Those are outdoor adventures. And you're not obligated to do that. But if you have a hankering to do it, I encourage you to just go ahead and do it. Try, get involved, and you'll find that your experience it so profoundly enriches your life. That's all I can say is if you're going for enrichment, that's a good way to do it, is go do things. Let me give you an example of an adventure that everybody can do. It's not a hard one in this nation. Get yourself a good map, good road map. Go out and find a part of the country that you've never been to. Drive to that area and get off the highway. Go on the back roads. Find little towns. Have meals in little cafes, camp out, occasionally stop at a motel, go to the local town and get your clothes cleaned in the local laundromat, and just wander around for a week or two. I've done that a number of times, and it is an extraordinarily enriching experience to do something like that. And it's something that everybody can do, and it's easy.
That's a great idea. Now I just want to get in the car and drive and see where I can get lost on some kind of an urban adventure.
Get off the highway, get onto the back roads. That's where real life is.
Yeah. And Bigfoot too. So I gotta.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Not to go down that trail.
Well, you can run into really strange things. I didn't run over it, but I ran into a California condor stretched across the road once.
Oh, wow.
Up in the mountains behind here. And it was a little tiny back road. And I stopped the car because there was something in the road, and I took a look at it, and it was a California condor, and it was stretched all the way across the road. By the time I got the camera out, the condor was gone. He had flapped his way off, but he was just sunning himself in the road. You never know what you're going to run into.
That's amazing. What do you have to say? I had a conversation just yesterday with a young woman. I was telling her about the book fest and even mentioning this panel. She kind of made, one of those flippant comments about, oh, me and my friends, we like to read, fun stuff, genre fiction. I don't think she used the term genre fiction, but she was talking about sci-fi and romance and romantasy and stuff like that, not to discount any of those genres. But what would you like to say to somebody who maybe has passed by the memoir section because they don't necessarily feel that they're going to have that rush, that suspense, that narrative flair, so to speak? Sue, I'll ask you that first. What would you want to say to that reader?
So, yes, I have a lot to say to that reader. And that's fine. I mean, reading is just good, whatever you're reading. But reading memoir, creative nonfiction, any form of creative nonfiction, we're really writing about the human condition. And what else? What do we really have at the end of the day but our personal narratives? I mean, that's how we learn about each other. And for example, you could read a history book about war and learn a lot of facts. Or you could read a memoir written by a soldier who actually fought in that war. You'd really learn much more about what that war or any war felt like by reading memoir. Or you could read, let's say, a how-to book, how to recover from an addiction. And how-to books are fine. They certainly serve a purpose. But if you really want to know what it feels like to struggle with an addiction, I would say read a memoir. And in terms of like sort of genre fiction, I mean, it's good. It's good escapism. And there's a lot that, good reasons to want to escape into some other world. And so I'm not like slamming that at all, but it's just more adding to your reading list. What else can you read? And I think being able to read about somebody else's life, we get to sort of live their lives. But by doing so, we also much better understand our own lives. And, really, when you think about it, that is all that we have, are these human connections that are so important. And so that's why I would give a big plug for adding, all forms of creative nonfiction to your reading list.
Bill, would you like to add anything to thoughts for the readers who are out there?
Oh, sure. Every genre is a different way to make meaning in the world, how to understand what's happening, to give you a lens to interpret your experiences and shape your relationships and figure out where you want to go in the world, right? So every genre gives you some vision of making meaning. But fiction, you're playing with other people's meaning. These authors have created beautiful worlds and drawn out insights, and that's wonderful. But I find memoirs to be powerful because it sends the message, you can too. Here's how I made sense of my life. Here's how I processed my experiences, and I'm offering this as a model for you too. And I think that's really powerful. If we're only reading other people's meaning, if we're only borrowing other people's senses of what's important and how to understand the world, then we're never really developing our own lens, right? We're never really developing our own capacity for making meaning. And that's where I think memoirs are really powerful. I started it in my own project, not thinking, oh, I'm interesting enough that I deserve a memoir. But for that reader that you talk to, there's a little bit of sex, there's a little bit of romance, there's a little bit of humor, there's a little, there's some heavy stuff, and it's all wrapped up in reflection and making meaning. And I would invite people to look at memoirs not as, I'm just learning about this person's life, but really as a model of how do I make meaning of my own, and how do I make sense of my own. And I think that's really empowering. I think that's we could all be a little bit more empowered in that way.
I guess it's
Absolutely.
my turn.
Yeah, please.
A little slightly different perspective. The world is full of interesting people. Almost everybody out there is interesting in one way or another. And what a good memoir does is it introduces you to somebody who's probably worth knowing in one respect or another. Somebody who becomes a friend when you read their memoir. It also, each of us only shares a little bit of this planet, a little bit of this world. And what a memoir does is it introduces you to a completely different part of the world. It broadens your horizons by showing you what somebody else has experienced and what the kinds of things that they've been through. And it gives you a much greater appreciation for the incredible, I hate to use the word diversity because it's so commonplace at this point, but there really is a diverse world, and it's worth exploring. And memoirs give you a chance to explore without actually having to leave your living room. And it's a great way of traveling.
Oh, yeah. I hear that. And you all write about family and loved ones in different ways, and whether that's framed through grief, dysfunction, trauma, all this reflection we've been talking about. It's in many ways probably helped you or changed the way you even are looking at your own loved ones. I'm curious if each of you would talk about how you feel your writing may have changed or not changed how your loved ones see you, or how they might see you if they were still with us today. Bill, let's have you start with that one, please.
After a couple of my siblings read the book, I was really curious what their perspective was. And I wasn't interested in telling their story. I really was just focused on telling my story, my perspective on our shared life together, and then how that set me down my own path. So I wasn't trying to tell their story. And the first reaction that I got from a couple of my siblings was, wow, I don't know you. Like, I thought I knew you well. I don't. And I'm sorry, so it sort of opened a door for some new conversations, which has been really, I didn't expect that. I really didn't expect that. I don't know what I expected from my family reading it, but they really, it opened a new door for conversations. I think for me too, it gave me a chance to make peace with some experiences and to really lift up some things that were joyful and wonderful and beautiful and that I wanted to hold on to. And I wanted my siblings and other people reading the book to be able to laugh along and enjoy it too. But with the tough stuff, I was able to make peace. And part of making peace was also figuring out where I could set a good boundary, and where I could set a line of, you know what, I'm going to try up to this point, and it's really okay to back off. So it's made me feel less obliged to my family. It's like, we share DNA, but that doesn't mean you own me or you own my story. Instead, I really appreciate the ones who are looking to build a new relationship or build a new path forward. And writing for me has also made me appreciate better chosen family, and which is really important for queer folks. Many of us feel marginalized from or estranged from or rejected from our families, and our chosen families, the people who are there for us, who do want to know us fully and love us fully and support us fully and want to share, share the road together. So it's helped. This project has helped me really appreciate my chosen family and the people in my life who are maybe more family-like to me than I ever appreciated, and than my own family, my own biological family have been. So it's a powerful experience, but I'll stop there. There's a lot to say there.
All right. Yeah. You're touching on this. It's a trope, the found family. We find it so much in fiction. And it's beautiful, Bill, when you find that in your real life. Again, it speaks to the reader being connected to you in a different way, because we've all felt the outsider, queer or not, somebody who's a member of a minority or a different religion. Chester speaks to the word diversity. I love that word. We need to lean into that word even more nowadays, because of the fact that we all have our differences. We've all felt like the odd person out. Sue, let me invite you to chime in on this as well, please. This, what would your family be saying, thinking? Are they saying or thinking anything, or is it still radio silence from that upside down sister?
Sadly, there is still silence from my upside down sister. I mean, I've written now, I think, 9 books, and I don't think she's read any of them. If she has, she hasn't told me about it. She knows about them, but she's still, I think, so scared of love and kind of scared of that human connection, which is what we've been saying is sort of at the heart in many ways of memoir and creative nonfiction, is that to form these sort of connections with each other. And so she does not read my work, and I don't think anybody in my parents are dead, but I have niece, nephew, none of them have read my work. I have some distant cousins who have read some, and even though I'm saying sort of sad things about our family, they've been actually very supportive, which has been amazing and not very nice. But I think more importantly, since I can't control what my sister's going to do or say or feel, I think more importantly is that for me, through the writing process, I have learned to feel more compassion about things towards my sister, really, in many ways, in that thinking about her as this upside down sister. So I got myself right side up. And I did that through therapy and through the writing process, all of these books. I used to be sort of upside down as well. I got myself right side up. But my sister is still upside down, and she still doesn't know how to really show her love. And that's really sad. I mean, it's sort of heartbreaking. And so I've learned to feel a lot more compassion towards her for not being sort of that older sister who could have protected me and sort of been there for me. And yes, I've learned compassion. And then, like Bill, I love what you said too about this found family, because through all my books, I've been able to sort of connect with other sort of wounded women, and who can relate to a lot of my stories. And so I get a lot of emails from them, and I, of course, always respond. And so, that's become very empowering part of this whole process of writing and teaching. And and then I teach as well. And so sort of teaching my students how to find their voices, to have the courage to tell their stories. I mean, that's sort of part of this whole process as well, so that we can have sort of a chorus of voices. And that can really resonate out in the world. So even though I haven't really gained my blood family from it, I've gained an enormous amount of sort of love, empowerment, and just connection.
Chester, would you like to speak to?
Yeah, I can speak. My experience is radically different from Sue and Bill's. I'm not, well, I have a younger sister. She's 15 years younger than me. So in effect, I grew up as an only child and then had the pleasure of cleaning the diapers of my young sister. My family was always clearly and tightly knit together. Try and give you an example of that. At the dinner, we always ate together, breakfast and dinner. And after breakfast and after dinner, my father would chase my mother out of the kitchen because she had prepared the meals. And he and I would clean up the kitchen. At the dinner table, there was always discussion about world events and what's happening at the office and all that sort of stuff. And of course, I had questions, but my parents always treated me as an adult from the earliest age. So if I expressed an opinion, they wanted to know what was behind that opinion, and they treated that opinion with great respect. So I had a radically different upbringing in that respect. And my sister had the equivalent, of course. And she turned out to be absolutely a marvel. But that's a whole different story about her success. So I didn't have that kind of a trauma. I had a slightly different kind of a trauma. And my trauma was that I was exceedingly bright. I mean, seriously bright by comparison with most of the people around me, most of my kids and most of my teachers and so on. And I had some real problems as a result of that. Partly because I didn't know how to react to other people, and partly because they didn't know how to react to me. So I got some help along the way. People went out of their way to smooth some things over for me. But there was a sense of isolation as a result of that, being very precocious. It was my habit to read at least one book a day, all the way through. Usually one, sometimes two, and on rare occasions, I would read 3 books a day. So that'll give you at least a little sense of how isolated I could be from the rest of the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the great thing about books in general, right? They're portable friends that we can take with us anywhere and everywhere. Somebody that we can always turn to and escape into. Now that we've got some of the heavy stuff out there, let's do what every good book does. Let's make us laugh as well. Irony and humor and kind of subverting expectations, putting in a good old twist here and there. I know that plays as well in all of your writings, even when those topics are really tough. Bill, let's start with you on this one. Why do you think that readers need to laugh as much as they need all of that honesty?
I hear so clearly in my head Emily Saliers of the Indigo Girls. I was going to say the Golden Girls, very different girls. Indigo Girls. Emily Saliers on a recording talking, as she's about to sing a song, says you'd cry, you have to laugh, otherwise you'd cry your eyes out. There are those moments where you have a choice of either melting in pain or laugh, and I've always chosen to laugh. I love laughing. I'm an easy laugh. I will laugh at any bad joke because I love laughing. I love sharing laughter with others. But it's also a technique that I learned as a teacher. You know, I started teaching high school, and I was a campus minister for many years, and uh, it was a way to both connect with my students. You know, if I knew that they were laughing, that means that I knew that they were paying attention and they were emotionally engaged and they were physically focused. You know, their mind was focused on whatever it was I was talking about, and I was able to take from laughter to go into more serious stuff, or to open a bigger question, or once we could laugh together in the classroom, then we could be vulnerable with each other. Once we could laugh with each other, then we could take on the big questions and not feel like, oh, I don't get it. You know, you can laugh it off that I don't understand whatever the abstraction is. You know, so that laughter, I think, for readers, between the author and the reader, that is that moment of shared connection. If I can make you laugh with telling you a story that I thought was funny, or maybe even something I didn't think was funny, and you still laugh, I'm glad, because that means that we're connected, and that means that once we're connected, then we can build on that relationship. You know, then I feel like if you've laughed at anything that I've written, then I know that you'll understand better the struggles that I had, or the fears that I had, and you'll also understand how I got out of the dark places. You know, joy and humor are really important to me on a daily basis, not just as a commodity, but as a tool, as something I use all the time to get me focused and staying optimistic and staying positive and staying creative. So that's how it works for me.
Sue, how does it work for you?
So, yes, I was just on, not too long ago, I was on a panel that was called Traumedy. And it was about taking tragedy and comedy and morphing them together and see what you come up with. And so all the writers on it, we had, examples in our writing that would speak to this idea of traumedy, which I think is a great word. I didn't come up with the word, but I think it's a great word. So for me, when I try to write funny, it's not like ha funny. Bill, you sound really funny, and I think you're probably really funny. I can't do that, but my humor is more sort of gallows humor and ironic. For example, one of my books is called "How to Survive Death and Other Inconveniences," and yeah, ironic, because obviously I'm not going to survive death, although I really am terrified of death, so I'm holding out hope. But and in that book, obviously, it's written with a lot of humor. Or another one of my books is The Papoon Fan Club: My Life as a White Anglo-Saxon Jew, which is also meant to be very ironic. And so, because it explores sort of the my unhappy childhood of growing up, and my family did happen to be Jewish, but so I had this mad crush on Pat Boone, who was just sort of the opposite of my father, and just the irony of that, like, I wanted him to adopt me. I wanted him to be my father. He was this sort of squeaky clean image. So for those of you who don't know, he's a 1960s pop music idol. And since then, we actually have developed a relationship, which is a whole other form of irony, because now he's sort of a fan of mine. So, but I think irony, by writing ironically, you can sort of deepen your narrative. And so, like, if you're writing just from that past experience, then it can be sort of just doom and gloom and tragic. But then the author, who now has more distance from it, you can see the irony of a situation. And so that irony can really deepen the narrative. And then I think it offers readers a way to see their own lives with this sort of larger perspective. So I think that that's one thing that irony, or any kind of humor like that, can add sort of to the conversation, that the way it can speak to a reader who can now see, oh, okay, that sad thing happened to Sue, but now she's writing about it with a sense of irony. And so if she can do that, then I can maybe start seeing my own situation, you know, a little bit clearer with this sort of deeper perspective. So I do think it offers readers a way to maybe get out of that sort of, I don't know, pit of despair they might be in, um, and see their lives or their situations in a broader, sort of more global sense.
Chester.
When I write stories, I write to entertain. So I try and find something in it, in most of the events that I've experienced, that I can express in a light touch. The word irony is appropriate because what I see in most situations is if you can step out of yourself and look at what actually happened from some distance, you will see that there's usually a lot of humor involved in the situation. So, for example, in many cases, accident or injury or something like that can develop into a very funny story. So I'll tell you an example from my medical background, which is extensive, as it turns out. So it turned out I had a problem with my thyroid. My thyroid was killing me. And as a result, I had to have the thyroid removed. But I couldn't have surgery on it because the anesthetic would kill me. So I had to be given a radioactive poison. And the day I went in to the clinic to pick up and swallow the pill of radioactive poison, some very interesting things happened. By distancing myself, I could watch what was actually happening. And what I found was I was a monster in a monster movie. People were frightened to be anywhere near me as I was walking out of the clinic after having taken this radioactive pill. I was that dangerous. And it was funny. It was absolutely funny. And I've written the story that way. Just going through the experience and watching, you didn't have to sign any documents leaving the clinic. You didn't have to do anything because everybody backed away from you as far as they possibly could while you were walking out into the parking lot. So that's a very funny situation, and it's a true life one. And all you have to do is watch people's reactions, and sometimes you can really get something hilarious out of it.
I give you credit. That is one way I would choose not to get reactions out of people by that. And thankfully, you are here and well, and you
survived the experience. Yes, but I got a good story out of it, and it's in the second book.
Indeed.
As a matter of fact.
Love that. Obsession. I mean, we have talked about metaphor and memory, but obsession is another thread that I see weaving through all of your memoirs, and memoirs in general. I think will do this. Sue, let's have you speak to this first and talk about how obsession plays in your work. And do you find yourself trying to unravel and figure out the same answer to a question over and over again? How does obsession work for you, or maybe even work against you in your writing?
Well, I'm a very obsessive person, and I consider that a good thing because writers do write their obsessions. And I will say, so my book, Selected Misdemeanors, there's 71 essays in it, and that's 71 obsessions right there. And I would say thematically that probably on some level, all my writing has to do with a search for self-identity, and the alienation that I felt from myself growing up. And so 3 of my obsessions, I've mentioned one of them. One is Pat Boone, one is Adam Lambert, and one is Jeffrey Dahmer. Now, you can't have three people who are more diverse than that. And I've written about them, but not to sort of understand them, but more to understand my obsession towards them. So, like with Papoon, as I mentioned, growing up, I wanted him to adopt me. I wanted to be his daughter. You know, he had 4 daughters. Would he even notice if he had a 5th? You know, so I really wanted him to adopt me, and sadly, he never did. But when I wrote about him, again, it wasn't to write about him, it was to write about him as metaphor. So he became a metaphor for like the safe, good father. Now with Adam Lambert, who is on American Idol, and he's a lead singer for Queen now, and I have an essay about him, and it's not about him. It's really, why am I obsessed with him? Because I completely was obsessed with him. I mean, I was like madly in love with him. And I'm like you, Bill, I should say that I am really into pop culture as well, and sort of like, what's our connection with it? Why are we drawn to certain things? And there are reasons why. So with Adam Lambert, he reminded me, particularly when he was on American Idol, of my hippie flower child days. Yeah, the way he dressed and sort of flamboyantly, and just the way he presented himself. And I really miss being a hippie flower child. I'm a little too old now to be a hippie flower child, but I still want to be. So I wrote about sort of how he became a metaphor for me for that time of my life when I wanted to be a hippie flower child, and how I wanted that time back. So that was the connection. Then with Jeffrey Dahmer, that I know that's a little bit scary there, and he had some issues. And but so when I was younger, I struggled with an eating disorder as well. And isn't his eating disorder sort of the ultimate eating disorder, I would say? And so again, I wasn't really writing about him, but I was writing about Jeffrey Dahmer as metaphor. And I was obsessed with him. I was collecting all of these articles about him, to the point where my therapist at the time said, "Sue, you have to throw those away and get over this. This is not helping you." And I said, "But I'll write about it. It'll be fine." But yeah, I am such an obsessive person. And but I think that that's a good thing for a writer. I mean, it's material. So I think that the sort of takeaway here is to not let your obsessions scare you. Like, be courageous enough to just claim them. If you're obsessed with Papoon, Adam Lambert, and Jeffrey Dahmer, you know, go for it and just discover, why are you obsessed with them? Because you'll find that they all are metaphors for something in your own life. So you're really learning more about yourself.
In that case, Sue, yeah, your obsessions actually do scare me.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. It makes you just that much more delightful and interesting. And it's okay if I'm a little bit afraid of you, because anybody that terms Jeffrey Dahmer's situation as, oh, he just had an eating disorder.
The ultimate eating disorder.
Right?
Bill. Yes, thank you, Bill. It is the ultimate one. And,
well, socially unacceptable eating disorder.
You think? But really, Desiree, you know me well enough now to know I'm not a scary person. Or a little bit.
No.
Some of my obsessions are, but I'm not. I promise.
Okay, Chester, let's talk about your obsessions and metaphors.
First of all, I'm not conscious of being obsessed about anything outside of myself. But there is an obsession that I have a real problem with, and that is when I'm doing a piece of work, whether I'm writing a story, something like that. Boy, then do I get obsessed. I get so focused on that, I just can't let it go. I will try and put something aside and go to bed at night, and I'll wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning with an idea, And I say to myself, I've just got to write that down and then go back to bed. But of course, I never do get back to bed. so, so I'm often on very short sleep. And somehow, if I'm lucky, I can find a way to catch up with a nap in the afternoon or something of that sort.
Yeah.
But yeah, so my biggest obsession has to do with, I guess, trying to get the right idea down at the right time. So when an idea does pop in, I have to record it. And that's my obsession. But as far as the outside world is concerned, I'm just so interested in everything that's going on out there. I guess you could say I'm obsessed with the entire planet.
It is an interesting place that we live. Indeed. Bill, your obsessions, my friend.
How long is this podcast? So many. So my academic background is in the comparative study of religion and ritual, and so metaphor and symbolism have always been really, really important to me. For me, it's always been tools to understand, right, what's going on, what are people intending to do, what transformation is happening from an experience, and all that. But my study of religion and comparative religions really trains me to pay attention, really to pay attention to things, not to impose a meaning or a language onto it, but if you pay attention to something, it will tell you what it means. It will tell you what is important to whatever the thing you're paying attention to. So paying attention is like my daily mission in the world. Some people might call it obsession. I think, you pay so much attention, you just want to get as much out of something. And when I am obsessed over someone like, I don't know, Madonna, I just feel like it's squeezing as much juice as you can get from the fruit, right? Squeezing as much juice as you can get from the orange. But then, of course, there's that moment where you realize, there's no more juice coming. So you have to be able to be aware of, when does this obsession become an unhealthy, habit, if it takes over your life and you're still not getting any juice from it, like, okay, time to walk away from that. I have yet to reach that moment with Madonna myself, but I liked paying attention to Madonna, not just because I love her music but because she has measurably moved the needle in popular culture, in global culture. She has moved the needle. I think that's interesting. So I want to pay attention. I want to understand, how did she do that? And so I pay attention to, certain threads in her work of, she's always doing social commentary. She's always a cultural parasite or a cultural mutualist. She's always reinventing herself and not taking on something new, but peeling back layers to reveal something that's inside. She's been a catalyst for, something new. I call her a catalyst for postmodernism, because she's doing all the things that she's laying groundwork for all of us to follow in the future. So I think paying attention to her is fun. Obsession can be a lot of fun, but you also learn along the way. You understand, what's the world that I want to live in? Do I want to live in Madonna's world and the world that she's paving? Maybe. Or do I want to start moving the needle myself? Or how do I do that? One of the things I love to pay attention to with Madonna is how she's been a queer ally and has changed over time, from being the white savior out in front, to sharing her platform, to getting out of the way and letting other people take the benefit from her platform. So, and that's a great model for queer allyship in her career and in her life. So obsession for me is not just spinning my wheels and I can't get my eyes off of whatever the subject is. I just want to squeeze as much out of it to understand what's going on in the world, and what do I want the world to be, and how do I participate in that? How do I contribute to that? And that's for me, I think, great fruit of obsessions.
At some point, I think you're right, Bill. We need to do a whole discussion just on obsessions, because that in and of itself could be the entire topic. But I'm going to give everybody here a chance for their final thoughts. Anything you want to say, get off your chest. Now's the time to do it. Chester, let's start with you. And here is, by the way, I know you've got it in the background, but we've got The Trek Continues here, so everybody can take a look at that beautiful cover.
Yeah,
Final thoughts,
I was fortunate in finding some very talented artists to put that cover together, and I've gotten good reaction as a result of that. Buy my book, obviously, and I would suggest to buy everybody else's book as well. Um, it's just the stories are meant to entertain people. And I think that's the perspective. Every one of the stories can be read independently. They can be read in any order. And they're just intended to um, show a different part of the world to people through my experience of those strange parts of the world. And it's just a matter of encouraging people to delve in and hopefully enjoy. The reactions I've gotten from the first book and also from the reviewers of the second book has been extremely positive. So my impression is that people really like what they're reading. So.
Yeah, definitely. Selected Misdemeanors. And here's Sue. Her book is also in her background, but I'll push it up forward so everybody can see the dead fish that you put on the cover. You sadist, you, Sue. Final thoughts, my friend.
So that belly up fish is one of my misdemeanors. I'll just let that, and one of my obsessions and misdemeanors. So I'll let that go with that. But I think my final thoughts is that everybody has a story to tell. Everyone's life is interesting and can be made interesting if you really dig deep and discover your own metaphors. And because metaphor is what makes your life unique and universal at the same time. So just trust your story, trust your voice, write, and also read. Thank you.
Thank you. And Bill, I'll hold this up so everybody can see. 6 to carry the casket and 1 to say the mass. We're pulling in all of those elements with this. Is this your room? What is this on the cover of your book? And final thoughts, please.
Well, the cover of the book is actually is a photograph taken by my friend Joel Avery, and it's a street scene in New York. He was walking along and saw this pink chair in the middle of all this trash and all this stuff being moved out of an old building. And for me, it looked like I was sitting in that chair and all of my life swirling behind me as a big mess and me looking out to the world trying to make sense of it. And it felt to me like, oh, that's exactly what I was trying to do with this book. And I think, for me, the biggest gift that has come back to me is when people have read the book and they reach out and they say, not like, oh, you're such a good writer, or, oh, that was so interesting, but when they say things like, that made me think about the time when ... I read an essay about the kitchen and how my mom is still very alive in my kitchen and what I learned from her. And that has struck several chords with people. And people are saying, that reminded me so much of, what the kitchen was like for me growing up or my relationship with my mom. So the great gift for me has been hearing those kinds of responses. Not that my life is interesting, but that people are finding their own lives more interesting to think about. And so I'm really grateful for this panel too, to be able to plug, sure, I'd like people to buy my book, but I'm more interested in people having conversations with each other that are meaningful and to get to know ourselves, not just by navel gazing, but by engaging and talking to people and sharing and articulating our own experiences so that people can come to know us better too. I think that vulnerability will only lead to empathy, and hopefully that's going to make a better world. So that's my goal.
And links to each of your books are on the BookFast website. We've been posting them in the chat during this conversation, so everybody can indeed and should go out and grab these books from Chester L. Richards, Bill Holzman, and Sue William Silverman. Thank you each so much for telling your truth and sharing your stories here with us today.
It's been a pleasure to be here.
It really has. Thank you so much for having us. And I've really enjoyed talking to all of you.
Likewise. Thank you.